Today's guest is the author of Butchered by Healthcare, Hormone Secrets and a New Body in One Day.
Yeah,
For more than 45 years, he has practiced medicine, with 3 decades performing cosmetic surgery. And today he's going to share with you new insights, ideas and information on corruption in the healthcare system. Would you please welcome our good friend, Dr. Robert Yoho. Welcome.
that's a live audience, I suspect.
We're live, yes, and if they could, they would. Now, what is healthcare corruption?
Daniel, first of all, let me do the 10-second disclaimer. I've got to do this because all the plaintiffs' lawyers, this is not medical care. It's not medical advice. Use this information at your own risk. And if you have problems of any medical kind, see a licensed provider. I'm retired. So what is medical? And we're on first name basis, Daniel and Robert's fine. So we spend as much on healthcare as the federal government spends on everything, as the federal government itself spends on everything else. So per person, this is twice what any other developed nation spends on healthcare. And despite this, about half these services are useless or damaging. And this is well known in medical academic circles, and they write articles about it all the time. And 50 to 70% of us have been convinced to take prescription drugs. And I hope I don't have to reference, the evil of that. It's insane. And we're Big Pharma, which is the people who sell us these drugs, is the most criminal industry in history. They've lost $86 billion since the year 2000 in judgments and settlements to civil plaintiffs and U.S. federal prosecutors. And they have thousands of criminal records. The payoff since 2004 for the 22 biggest drug makers have their own Wikipedia page of shame. And your listeners can look that up right now. Just look up pharmaceutical company settlements. Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and GlaxoSmithKline have all paid settlements over $2 billion for a single settlement. And Pfizer had a single anti-inflammatory that caused 50,000 deaths, and they knew it would happen ahead of time, and they rolled out the drug anyway, just like this most recent injectable product worked. So here's the quote I always read from Peter Rost. He's a former Pfizer marketing vice president. He wrote in his book, "It's scary how many similarities there are between this industry and the mob. Obscene amounts of money, killings, and deaths, bribing politicians and others. The difference is all these people in the drug industry look upon themselves as law-abiding citizens. However, when they get together as a group, it's almost like when you have war atrocities. People do things they don't think they're capable of because the group can validate what you're doing is okay." And that's from his book, The Whistleblower, and it's published probably 15 years ago. And we have another pharmaceutical company executive, a Park Davis CEO. He said, this is Harry Loyne, he said, if we put horse manure in a capsule, we could sell it to 95% of these doctors. So this is their attitude towards both the doctors and the patients. And we have an administration agency called the Food and Drug Administration, which supposedly oversees the whole mess, but half of its budget is paid directly by Big Pharma in the form of what's called user fees during the patent application process. And the UK regulator, NICE, has very similar conflicts. So these agencies view the companies as clients. And if the FDA refuses to approve a drug, they might have trouble making their own payroll. And this is why the FDA is thinking about approving this injection for our babies. And it's a true outrage, and it's happening right now. So the FDA and Big Pharma, they work together to fake the drug patent studies. They use statistical manipulation, corrupt their research subcontractors, and 75% of the pharma studies are done outside the United States. And my fantasy is a lot of these people are kids with baseball caps on computers in a basement in Pakistan. Now that may not be quite true, but it's nearly true. It's a worldwide operation, and they're allowed to hide studies that don't promote their drug sales. So, for example, for Gardasil, which is the HPV vaccine, Japan perfectly identical for the entire time the drug's been on the market. So here's another quote. Forgive me, I love quotes. Peter Gertsch, who's one of the founders of Cochrane, and he's familiar to any student of this field, he wrote, "The pervasive scientific misconduct has led to a research literature where one has to dig deeply to find the few gems in all the garbage." And this is the one you should try to remember. This is the title of a British Medical Journal editorial from July 2021. "Time to assume that healthcare research is fraudulent until proven otherwise." That's in one of the big 5 medical journals, probably the only one remaining with integrity. So these journals are prostitutes. Their editors are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars each year directly by the medical industry openly. And they have corporate ghostwriters that fabricate more than half of all the drug studies, even some textbooks. And the authors are paid huge fees just for the use of their name. In law or business or government, bribes like these could result in firing or criminal prosecution, but it's accepted practice in healthcare, and they call it conflict of interest. I call it bribery. So
So this connection between drug makers and mobsters, there's a lot of money going around. How does the money go around in this system? How does it go around?
well, it's paid for by a promiscuous system of distribution from government agencies, Medicare and so on, and insurance companies to the providers of various stripes, and it's like a land grab. All these greedy providers get paid, and there isn't a lot of supervisory. There's not a lot of oversight by the insurance companies because they get a percent off the top. They really don't care if the whole thing goes up. The hospitals are in this category too, and they're about 35-40% of the total gross expenditures for healthcare.
With the doctors who are prescribing the medication, are they working for the patient? Are they working for the healthcare system, or are they working for the pharmaceutical companies these days?
Well, it's a sick blend of capitalism and socialism. And let me give you an example of what happens in oncology or cancer care. The oncologist or cancer doctor is paid 20% of the cost of the drug right off the top. So they have their half dozen or dozen patients in their big room with administration of the drugs. They're all in these recliners. And the drugs cost at least $100,000 a year each. And their goal is to get as many people in these chairs as possible and get the 20% off the top. Plus, they get to bill Medicare or whatever for patient visits to their clinics. So these guys are getting wealthy. And it's a system of kickbacks, which would be illegal if it was between two doctors. If I was a doctor and you're a doctor, and I say, look, market this drug for me, here's 20% off the top, that would be called capping, which is a federal felony. But the drug makers get away with it, and it's not just the oncologist. Any drug administered in the office is potentially a situation like this. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think even the pediatricians get a similar kickback for vaccinations, which they buy from the pharmaceutical companies, inject into the children, and not a single one of those things has been subjected to double-blind placebo-controlled trials, which is a sugar pill trial, which is the standard for determining efficacy and safety. So we don't have any clue about any vaccine, and we're now up to 75 jabs for these kids during their adolescence, and there are many disasters that are happening, and the efficacy of no vaccine has been well established.
It proves that we're just incredibly ignorant to what's happening in the background. What are some of these questions that, as parents, we need to be asking as individuals? What are these questions that we need to start asking to understand what's good and bad, right or wrong for our bodies?
Daniel, you think they're ignorant. I was completely ignorant. I'm like Rip Van Winkle. I woke up and I started studying this material, and it was insane, red pill after red pill. And I just feel sick about the whole thing now. And I'm still learning more that makes me very ill. But what kind of questions should they ask? Well, the real problem is the biggest problem in the world today is the ruination of the First Amendment. It's not all the people that have been killed by this new injection therapy, and there are probably millions worldwide. It's not the therapies that have been run down by these mobsters and turned the doctors and the patients and the whole society turned against the simple treatments that would work for this new disease. It's the ruination of our First Amendment, and it makes it very hard to get information because all of our information sources, the media, the social media, the newspapers, it's all been turned over and controlled, and as of 2 years ago. And so it's tough, but there are some free information sources which are sprouting up. I mean, we've got new social media sources, and we have Substack, which is what I write on, robertyoho.substack.com. And you can it's a window into all this work and all these problems. And there are other free doctors and writers on Substack, and that's the best single source now. But we're not sure how long it'll be before those people sell that thing to some freaking Facebook or YouTube or whatever. And they'll ruin it.
So if these, you mentioned the number there, 75 injections for the average, is that the average by the time you're a teenager? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's the man. That's the mandated vaccination schedule. And it just makes me want to cry because some of them are clearly horrible and others are unproven. And a lot of them still contain mercury. We're sending off mercury-laden vaccines to the third world. There's no protection for those people. Our autism rate has grown from 1 in 100,000 or something like that to 1 in 30 for boys. I mean, it's just a stunning epidemic, and we don't know what's caused it, but we think there are authorities that think the vaccinations have caused it. They're certainly causing a lot of harm.
What leads somebody to go into this so blindly? Is it that we've been taught just to trust the doctor? Is it that when we sit in front of the doctor, we're just so ignorant that we don't know what to ask? What's led to this problem?
We're currently, the physician community and the pharmaceutical / medical industrial cabal, we are currently burning through the trust that we have built into the patients over the course of hundreds of years, if not millennia. And I mean, it's a sad deal. I mean, I have a hard time throwing rocks at the doctors because they're consumed by their job. You can't imagine what happened with Obamacare. They were required to spend 40% more time clicking on computers just to get paid. And in a sensible move, we thought, well, we should computerize all the medical records. But what it did was it completely burned any of their energy that they would have spent thinking critically or doing anything. So these guys are captured by this perverse system that has been put in place by a corporatocracy. And it's not just the pharmaceutical companies, it's the hospital organizations, it's the device organizations. I mean, the medical devices like hip implants and all this, many of those have very little supporting them. Now, hips are probably the most successful surgery in the 20th century. That's a bad example. But the overall intellectual framework for the medical devices is less substantial than the pharmaceutical companies because they're required to do, in theory, to do double-blind placebo-controlled trials. And in practice, they ruin their own studies.
Is this flowing over into the psychotherapy community as well?
Oh, man. The psychiatry, okay, now psychotherapy is an old paradigm where, it originated with Freud, and it has to do with these fabricated thought processes about how you approach healing through interpersonal work. And the basis of it, healing through interpersonal work, is entirely a good thing. But they're crazy, and the framework did a lot of damage, and it resulted in a lot of patient injury. But much worse is the modern psychiatric drug system, where arguably the entire formulary should be thrown in the wastebasket, and the psychiatrist should be forbidden to do anything anymore because these drugs are tremendously damaging. We have 4 different varieties. The one that is well known, the Valium class drugs, they are tremendously addictive, and they're a real problem. But much worse are the SSRIs, which are the antidepressants, which cause a tremendous amount of violence and suicide. And then we have the amphetamine-like drugs, which have been known since World War II to be tremendously addictive, and we've spread this promiscuously into our young children. And then, and this is a crazy story, we have these atypical antipsychotics, which were billed as being less injurious than the Thorazine-type original antipsychotics, but they shorten life by 10 to 20 years, along with a myriad of side effects. You may have seen these tardive dyskinesia side effects where the people make these funny, and that's brain damage, and it's permanent in many cases.
Well, that was the same face that psychiatrist pulled when he was on the stand for Johnny Depp.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Dr. Spiel, somebody. It was crazy. Now, these pharmaceuticals to deal with so-called psychiatric problems, are they a smart pill? Do they get to the root cause, or do they just mask something else? How do they work?
That's a softball question, and obviously, my opinion. My opinion is, and the opinion of all my stuff is derivative. It's all highly referenced. This thing has 500 plus references in it, and so the answer is that they're brain toxins, and they have huge effects on brain functioning. They do what's called crossing the blood-brain barrier, which means they can get into the brain. Most other substances, the brain has a very clever, intelligently designed system where most drugs don't get into it, and the brain is kept pristine. But these things go in and cause toxicity, and ultimately they all cause damage of some kind. Some of it quite permanent. And so, no, they're extremely powerful, and they've been allowed to be approved by these studies that were adulterated. I mean, here's an example. The shortest acting anti-anxiety pill was approved after a 6-week study. The first 2 weeks it seemed to work. And you'll come up with a name, and I'm blocking on the name right now, but it's a very short, it's a 1 hour, 2 hour first 2 weeks it worked. The second 2 weeks it didn't work, and the third 2 weeks it caused harm. And it was approved anyway based on the first 2 weeks, and people take this stuff chronically for years on end, and it has a net harm.
Incredible. Scary.
Yeah, it is scary. I mean, the psychiatry, in my opinion, is the most corrupt industry, and I got to hand it to the crazy Scientologists. They got it right from the start. I don't know how they figured it out so early.
Mm-hmm. So with the next steps for people, obviously we want them to read your book and to start to ask the right questions for themselves and their physicians wherever they're from. What can we learn from your book, Butchered by Healthcare?
Okay, there's a couple of tricks we have that we didn't have 2 years ago. And the first is you can consult with anyone in the world who gives you permission to do it, any doctor. And always before, the medical boards held people back because what they said was you need a good faith medical exam in person. And there is something to that. But with the pandemic, we were allowed to talk to people over the phone, and you have to be careful about how you do it and so on. But that's one. The second thing is the patient advocacy groups. And even though these are sponsored by drug companies, you can get a great deal of information. And there are people in these groups that often will know as much about the disease as any doctor. So if you're not being handled well locally, you can get oversight from Stanford or Harvard or Mayo Clinic or wherever, and then they can tell your doctor what to do, because every place in the country has access to the same meds. Mm-hmm. If you have an unusual cancer or some other crazy condition. And there are miracles to be had. I want to emphasize at the end of my presentation that we are not we're not saying that medicine doesn't work. It's just half of it doesn't work, and then we do all kinds of good things,
Yeah, I agree. My father just had a hip replacement, and he's back on his feet walking around after about 6 weeks, and he's looking better than he ever has before. But unfortunately, he got
the next day.
Yeah. His medical doctor said some people do, but he recommends they don't, and that's his own approach. And but then he got something else this week, so he's been in bed with a. So very interesting. I don't know if that was complimentary as part of the operation. Well, Dr. Robert, thank you so much. Retired Dr. Robert Yoho. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to go to Amazon. I want you to pick up a copy of the book, and I'm going to share it with you here so you can see what it is. And it's called Butchered by the Healthcare System. And if you're being treated at the moment and you want new advice, if you're considering having any type of vaccine and you want to have an alternate opinion on it, head over and read Dr. Robert's book. You can see it there on Amazon, Butchered by Healthcare. Robert, thank you so much for being here with us today. Incredible insights and sharings. And I'm still trying to get my head around this, and I've got to go back and process this now, because as somebody who is ignorant, and I believe we're all ignorant, I don't understand the medical system. When I sit in front of, I was going to say God, but when I sit in front of the doctor, sometimes I substitute them for God. And I say, please save me. And also we have that need for speed as humans. And I think we've got to just stop, pause, and think and consult not just one source of information, but multiple sources of information, so we're not as ignorant as we possibly could be.
This thing was written right before the pandemic. I don't have anything in it about this modern issue or the vaccine for that, and my opinions about the other injectable preventive agents. The vaccines are not sophisticated in there. You need to go to my Substack for more. robertyoho.substack.com. Thank you.
My pleasure. So I'll put the links up there in the show note. Do it now, ladies and gentlemen. Fascinating reading. Learn more about Robert Yoho. Robert, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll connect again soon. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, one new idea at the right time could save your life, but it could also make you rich. Have a wonderful day.